Welcome to Rogue Trader. Please read the disclaimer and remember that prices can go down as well as up. Hello and welcome to a stock analysis update for Frontier Developments. 2 weeks ago, Frontier just gave us a trading update and it perked the share price up a bit. This video is going to be just an update on that. If you want all the nitty-gritty details for Frontier Developments, take a look at any of my previous videos where I go into lots of detail about the company. In my last video, Elite Dangerous confirmed broken, which I did about a year ago, I go into great detail about how they completely ruined the Elite Dangerous Odyssey update and how the release of that game was a complete misfire. Here's that video then. And at the time, the share price hadn't really reacted properly when I had a look at the situation on the ground. I was taking a look at the actual numbers of people playing Elite Dangerous following that debacle. And when I calculated what I thought their revenues would look like from that data, here's a slide from that video a year ago. I had their revenue at only 106 million. Whereas the analysts still all had it at 140 million, judging by how they weren't selling. So I sold up to 75% of my Frontier Developments then. And when a trading update was released, my estimation techniques were actually vindicated quite well, and the share price dropped really bad. So given this new trading update for the full year 2022, I can't help but have another stab and seeing if I can beat the experts again, because that's what this channel is all about. So first of all, to take a look at this trading update, which is for the full year 2022, and they announce a record revenue of 140 million in 2022, and they say that Jurassic World Evolution has sold 1.3 million units. Also, that Warhammer 40,000 Demon Hunters is performing ahead of expectations. First of all, let me tell you that the Warhammer 40,000 is a bit of a distraction. When I look at the player numbers, it was only 5,000 on launch, and then now it's already down to 2,000. So really, that's just noise. In fact, when I look at the other Foundry releases, they've all actually bombed. Struggling only has 4 players right now, and Lemmings Gate started with 78 players and it's now down to just 10 players on average. So their Foundry Games publishing is a bit of a failure, to be honest. They're claiming that they're going to achieve 20% growth in revenues on average in subsequent years. But what really stood out for me was the profitability part, where they came out with the fact that they're only going to be making 1 to 2 million. And this was mainly because of a 7 million amortization of the Elite Dangerous. This is sales they're expecting to get from it, which they're not going to get because they completely messed the game up. And also 5 million put into their share options trust fund for their employees. So updating my financials for Frontier Developments, and although they are getting in these higher revenues, whereas before they were making nice net incomes every year of 17 million plus, it now looks really nasty at only 1 million. If you take out the share benefit trust and the amortization for Elite Dangerous, that would mean about 30 million normally. So whereas before we had this really nice profile, at 13 million it's not so impressive, and we see the narrowing here between the income and expenditure. So financially, the truth is that the company's a bit embattled at the moment. But really, what I'm most interested in is predicting their future revenues growth. Now, here's Frontier Development's claim of 20% increase every year. And funnily enough, when I look at the analysts' numbers, they're actually just matching what Elite Dangerous have said. It's almost like they don't even bother to look, just go along with what they're told by Elite Dangerous. Now here's my numbers, and the key point is I see them missing their targets quite a bit in full year 2023, but then they'll be back up to standard in 2024, but only if the best case scenario is achieved for their Warhammer game. In the current environment, there's a good chance that the share price will be hammered anyway in the next year, regardless of results. But I think that they should take a bashing when they fail to meet their full year 2023 guidance. I bought Frontier Developments back in 2020 and I sold 75% of it around here with what I regard now as a bit of a play amount. But I'm going to be very happy to sell that when this hard stop loss is met. I do think the future of the company is very interesting because in a way these are kind of like growing pains as they transform from a company with just one or two titles where each new release makes a massive impact to a situation in the future where they'll have a lot of titles. There's a lot of data now that the kind of games that they release, they still retain a decent trickle of sales long after the initial release. So when we get to about 2025, it will be a different company with a nice established steady revenue coming in from a whole number of games, plus a production lines of new big games coming in, which will be a lot easier for the company to handle. So I still think we're in for a unsettling period. And then when we get to 2024, my numbers for the Warhammer game are best case as far as I'm concerned, just to miss their targets a bit. So I'll definitely be putting Frontier Developments into my second division watch list. But I do think that then from 2024 onwards, although they may be punished a bit for not keeping their promises, there could be a very interesting longer term story for Frontier Developments as they mature into more of an established company. So I'll just briefly go into how I got these numbers. On the left here, I have each game, and for each game, I've got the number of unit sales and then how many million I think they'll make from those number of unit sales, which I get from knowing what the unit price is. You can get the price history from Steam, and you have to modify it a bit because there are discount periods at various times which you have to factor in. But from these price estimations and the known number of sales, that then gives me expected revenues. Now these ones in grey are where Frontier Developments have announced how many unit sales for a particular game. And most recently in this month's trading update, they gave us the 1.3 million number for Jurassic World Evolution 2. However, in the last year, they've been very tight-lipped about what their unit sales are, probably because of how bad Elite Dangerous has done. But luckily, these three games are all fairly established, plus they told us the numbers for Jurassic World Evolution. That's because I've got well-established data for these older games and the corresponding increase in unit sales. That means I'm fairly confident in my estimations for these games. So I was able to work out the Elite Dangerous income simply from deducting the 140 million that they say in their trading update from my estimations for these games, giving me my own rough guesstimate that they sold 1.1 million, that they managed to peddle 1.1 million copies of Elite Dangerous Odyssey. Now, the Formula One management game, it's easy to think this is going to be a massive blockbuster, but you've got to remember that it's the F1 manager game, not the actual proper F1 game where you're racing the cars yourself. Now, the F1 2021 game seems to bring in users of around 7 or 8,000 on average. So that would put it about up here. However, it's only the management game. So I've presumed that it will only achieve half that, which will make it, being a slightly generous, like a Planet Zoo release. So that's how I estimated their sales for the Formula One game. The good thing about that game is they release it then every year for the next 4 years, which everyone then has to buy to have the latest drivers and the most up-to-date cars. So it's a good perpetual income for them, where you get perpetual initial sales every year. So I've modelled that in there. And then the Warhammer game, it's already been delayed, and they've claimed it will come out in 2024. So you've got to remember, if they fail to deliver, which won't be the first time, that will be a massive hit on them for the 2024. However, assuming they do release it in financial 24, how much money will it make? I've looked at the current Total War Warhammer game. When that was originally released, it had numbers of 40,000 players. This makes it to Frontier Developments like a Jurassic World Evolution times two. However, the numbers these days are quite low. And this was back in 2016, where there wasn't really so much competition. But still, I've calculated it in based on a 2x Jurassic World Evolution, and that got me this 60 million number. Bear in mind that although it seems like a mega blockbuster at first, please bear in mind that Warhammer have totally saturated the games market. These are all the games they've released for their fantasy stuff, and here is even their Age of Sigmar stuff. Even in 2021, all these Age of Sigmar titles. So I do think that modeling them based on the initial Total War data is reasonable, and I do consider this a best case. It might be they missed it might be they missed getting the game out again, or they could screw up the game, or because of the saturation of other games, it just isn't as impactful as expected. So that's how I got my estimate. I think the current analyst estimates are too optimistic based on my data. I think that the analysts are just copying what Frontier Development say themselves, because I think there's an underperformance in 23, followed by an upshoot in 24, whereas they just assume 20% a year increases. And I don't understand how you can get 20% a year increases based on how I've looked at it. So I think there's going to be lots of excitement for Frontier Developments the next couple of years. They had an exemplary trend of net income, which is now ruined. But I do consider these growing pains. They have gone through the initial growth phase. And if you go back to 2015 and look at their revenue history from there, I do see an interesting kind of longer term trend. The orange here, by the way, are my estimates, and the blue is historical revenue data. But I do see the bigger picture beyond the next few years being highly dependent on dramatic news stories of whether they manage to release a game on time or not, and whether or not they manage to not screw up a game or not. I do see them maturing as a company where they have a nice big portfolio, which on aggregate makes them less sensitive to individual games releases. And there could be an interesting story setting up here. But I'll put them on my second division watch list, and I want to see the results, and I want to see hard release dates for the Games Workshop game before I'd risk coming in again to this stock. So that completes my stock analysis update for Frontier Developments. Like I say, you can go to my earlier videos if you're interested to see me go in depth in the financials and all about the history of the company. Actually, I go into the individual games more as well. But that's it for this video. Please remember, I'm a total amateur, just vlogging my investment journey. So please take all I say with a pinch of salt. I've now set up a Discord channel where you can get the slides and data that I have in my videos. And I've set this up as a forum for amateur investors like me to discuss different ideas, but it's more to learn from each other rather than providing any kind of financial advice. I'm going to start doing monthly calls on the Discord because I think it would be good to be talking about things as well. You can access my Discord channel via Patreon. It's a £5 a month to access. So of course you give it a try for a month and then pull off it if it's not for you. So that's a good way to support my work if you like what I do. And I also think it's good to have some kind of filter on there. At the end of the day, I always remember that I'm doing these videos purely to help encourage myself to put the proper work in required before making any investment. Okay, so end of my video. Hope you've enjoyed it, and whatever you're doing, have fun. Only invest in a small amount you can afford to lose.